This is Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. I'm your host, Adam Cox, and joining me today, we have Carmelle Crinnion, who is a transformation coach. She is an energy and sound alchemist, and now she is also an author. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
More than welcome. So we're connecting live all the way over to Sydney from here in London. Tell us a bit about what being a sound and energy alchemist is and how you actually found yourself becoming one of those.
Wow, great question. Very loaded. Sound and energy alchemist. Well, as we know, everything's made up of energy. And the way that I do my healing sessions is I tune into the energy frequencies and often produce tones and sounds. And I go into the frequency of a different energy of language that flows through me. And that really helps to unlock a lot of codes that people are ready to move into in their work, in their life, to transform to the next level. And I came about that about 10 years ago now, when I started my own healing journey. And the process of my own healing journey, not too long, within only about 18 months, it began to reveal that I had quite amazing healing powers, which slowly unfolded. They became released in my hands. I was doing a kinesiology course because I was just so amazed by the results that I was getting in a kinesiology session at the time, and at the improvements that it made in my well-being on every level. And so as I was studying kinesiology, my hands actually started to move on their own in the exact trauma release patterns that I would have been doing from the guidebook. And I just allowed that energy to flow through me and realized it was coming from this place where it was me, but it was me on a next level who already knew what to do without having to be guided by a book. And I started using that on my personal training clients. And then in 2012, I went for a spiritual retreat to Peru, to Machu Picchu. And upon return of that, a few weeks later, I started channeling words and a language that I didn't know. And it soon became clear that I was to bring this into my sessions. And I began to do that. I was pretty much taken through a crash course in this language, which now just flows through me like it's second nature.
Wow. Because I mean, there's many different ways of interpreting that you've got a natural talent, that you pick things up quickly, that your unconscious mind was learning things without your awareness, or that you're a conduit, that, you're a catalyst for some energy that kind of flows through you. How did you arrive at your evaluation for what was happening there?
Well, my kinesiology teacher was also a spiritual kinesiologist, and she had a gift of also being able to channel through information. And she did some similar things that I do now. So therefore, I was surrounded by someone who was a little bit out there themselves. And I was in absolute awe of what she did. And each session, I was just amazed at what she did. And so therefore, I think I was sent there. I think that was my introduction and my lesson. And while what we do is very similar, it's also totally different. She comes from a totally different place in her work than I do. And she's a totally different personality, and the structure of her work is based on a different, she's sort of taken one avenue, whereas I do this healing work and this transformational coach. I do a lot of counseling as well in my work.
Were there any clues in your childhood or kind of, let's say younger years, where actually you might have a talent for this kind of stuff before you officially went into a classroom, started learning this kind of stuff, before you needed to go on your own healing journey? Were there any clues in your childhood as to maybe you've got a bit of a talent for this?
The only thing that I recall, and as I was writing my book, a few of these things came up, was one time when I was in primary school. So I would have been about, 8, 9 years old. Because I was raised Catholic, I was sitting in Mass, and after we received the sacrament of Holy Communion, we would often have silent prayer time. And I learned a prayer that I would recite in my head as the after communion prayer. And I just remember being transported to this beautiful place during that prayer. And it was almost like going home, and it was almost like I was sitting with God. And so I sort of look back on that now as a real experience that I didn't understand what was going on, but it made me want more of that special place that I was in. So that's from a very young age. Until all these years later, I didn't begin to revisit that place.
I think a lot of therapists, counselors go through a similar path that you've went through, in the sense that they're looking to solve their own problems first. They're not looking to help other people. Certainly that was my experience. I had severe anxiety throughout my teenage years and early 20s, and I had to fix myself. But then once I knew how to do that, then it became, almost a duty to kind of see if I could help other people uh, go from the place where I was at to, a different place. What was your healing journey? Where did it come from, and what did you learn from your own process?
All right. Well, when I began seeing the original kinesiologist, who was also a psychologist, I had been going through some major health issues that drained my energy completely, and I was very anemic, so I was very drained. And at the same time, my marriage was in a bit of a crisis. We were going through a terrible financial situation, and just with everything coming together, with low energy, four children, including two younger ones and two that were a bit older, um, just everything sort of came tumbling down on me. And I was recommended to see the lady that I saw, Marianne, by another one of my friends, who used to massage me and my husband at the time. And she said, maybe you should go and see Marianne. She's amazing. And I put it off for a little while, but once I did, I never looked back. So I was looking for answers. But the very first session that I had with her, like I said, I hadn't really heard of what kinesiology was before. I didn't know what it was, hadn't heard the term. And during that first session, when she tapped in and used my body as a conduit to answer questions from the highest place in me, and from the truth in me, because the body doesn't lie, and that's why they do muscle testing in kinesiology. I was in tears, because at that stage, I very much doubted that I had a soul and that I knew anything and that my intuition actually worked. I was convinced that I was put on this earth at this stage to let other people tell me how to live my life. I just felt like I had no compass.
And obviously that changed at that point. And what became the North Star of your compass from that point onwards?
Well, like you said before, once you discover your own gift and your own talent, and it just comes so easily to you. When I say it comes easily to you, it didn't come easily in the beginning, because it took me a whole lot of digging and diving and work on myself, which I did choose to go down that path. So I went down that path of really focusing on finding the next person and the next person who were going to be great for my healing journey. And that's when I chose to study kinesiology. And then it was just a natural progression, because I've been working in the fitness industry since I had my first daughter. And just so I already had a client base, and I just thought, the people I'm working with, they all have weight issues, and there's got to be so much more than diet and exercise to bringing them to a place of homeostasis within themselves, and a place of where they can grow and maintain the weight coming off and staying off. And so when I began using that with these clients of mine, everything just started progressing on every level. It all came together, and so that was like the missing link.
Fantastic. And where did sound come into the equation? Because a lot of what you've talked about so far is kind of more of the, let's say, the physical kind of element. How did sound become a part of that kind of healing toolkit that you have?
Well, again, that was after 2012, so very early January in 2013, after returning from Machu Picchu. I had a few spiritual experiences in Machu Picchu. A group of 22 of us went. It was led by my spiritual healer at the time, the kinesiologist. And on return from that, when I had that conversation, it was a conversation in the car with the mother. She identified herself as mother because she just said one day, we're ready to speak through you now. And that was just as I was driving along, and I've gone, hello, who's this? I know it's me, but who's this? And she said, it is I, mother. We're ready to teach you our language, and you're going to start using it in your work. And then she just started coming through. And upon the event of teaching me how to pronounce this foreign language, which there's no immediate translation for the words of the language because it's an energetic language, and we're not meant to understand the words that I bring through. We're meant to bring in and allow surrender to the energy of the words. And once you do, and once you take that need to understand away, then the magic will drop in. And I find that when I'm working with clients, I lay them on a massage table, and as soon as I, put my hands over them, the next level of channeling starts. So there's one level of channeling in conversation in the English language that I speak to them, and a lot of messages come through in that part of the session. And then when they're on the massage table, it can also be via, Skype or Zoom, which I do sessions. The energy still travels regardless of we're in the same room or not. So I place my hands over. The hands start to do their own work and their patterns in energetic healing. And then my voice just starts toning. And honestly, the toning is something that's just so powerful. It's just long notes on different pitches. And I had a client once who was a musician and a music teacher. And at the end of the session, she was just blown away by how many octaves that I reached from high to low and everything in between in that session. I believe it's because she was a music teacher and that's what she responded to, that I did so much of it in her actual session. And I am by no means vocally trained, or I'm not a singer, never been, gifted in that way at all. But when I am in session, the voice just transforms to this beautiful, long-held. So I've learned to use my breath a lot as well, really be able to use my breath in holding the notes for the amount of time that's important too. But also when I'm with a session, and I've had this happen to many clients, I might be hovering over their head and doing some energetic pattern work with my hands, and also bringing through sound, language, and all of this energy. And they've got their eyes closed. And often they'll say at the end of the session, because I'm in my own world, they're in their own, I must reiterate that I'm always 100% in control. So if, nothing can go wrong. But if I'm hovering over their head, so to speak, and doing all the work there, sometimes they'll feel the pull to open their eyes because some of them said, I felt like someone was pulling my feet, like holding onto my feet and pulling them. And at that time, they opened their eyes and they realized that I was standing at the top of the table near their head, and vice versa. And another woman who was pregnant with a Down syndrome baby, she came and she had a session. She knew the baby was Down's. They'd chosen to keep this baby and they felt so much love. And this baby was, about a month or two from being born. And at one stage she said, I felt like this baby was just birthing through my back. And it was like this huge pressure and energy. And I get that a lot. The tones, the frequencies, they bring through something really magical that people physically feel, but it's not pain and it's not pressure. It is pressure, but it's from this metaphysical place inside of them. They just can't deny. They just can't deny the realness of it, the reality.
I think anyone that's experienced, like a sound bath with the kind of the bowls of all different frequencies, they kind of, it's a strange sensation because you're connecting to the different frequencies and you can actually feel the vibration. You know, it kind of almost like unlocks certain things that you wouldn't normally have access to with the standard vocal range. But I guess your vocal range has a bit more flexibility, and it sounds like you definitely channel your intuition to tap into what's necessary to do, you know, the same kind of things. When you wrote your book, was there a particular calling that you had? Because it sounds like you're very aligned with your intuition. Did you feel like it was something like your healing journey that you just had to do? You had to kind of get this knowledge, this wisdom, this information out there.
I did. I felt that that was really important. And through the course of working with Dawn Bates, she's my author coach and my publisher, and I very synchronistically came across her on Facebook on a friend's page, and I didn't even realize it wasn't my friend's post. I just thought, I didn't know this woman was an author coach. Wow. And then when I looked at who had written it, I just immediately commented. We ended up private messaging and then got on a call. And so I purchased her author uh, coaching program. And so I guess it unfolded from there because it was placed in front of me. And that again was following my intuition, because after I'd only known this woman, 5 or 10 minutes on the phone, I was purchasing this package and committing to writing this book that I'd been pondering about. In the few months prior, that's when I'd been writing a lot of blogs and having some articles published in online magazines. So I felt like it was a natural progression, but I am such an advocate of following that first hit of intuition, and I followed it. And Dawn helped me to unlock and the name Unlocked. I've actually noticed that I've used it myself a lot in our conversation
Mm.
unintentionally, and so have you. So I feel like, wow, I'm really feeling that this book Unlocked was that was the exact word that I needed to use, and that came about in the first session or two when Dawn said, "Do you know what you're going to call it?" And I immediately just came up with that name, Unlocked. And so I believe that like I said, on the cover it says, "Unlocked, discover your hidden keys." And we all have those keys inside of us. It's just that we're not aware and we're too scared. A lot of us are too scared to follow that intuitive step because we want to make sense of the intuition when it hits. And intuition doesn't work like that. And you probably know that, Adam, because when you get the hit of intuition, and you go and do that thing that you feel strongly called to without question, that's usually when big magic happens in your life.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. That's certainly
Yeah.
been the case for me. And it was interesting you kind of talked about the kind of the keys and the unlocking, because I think most people when they dream, when they wake up, they forget the dream like 5 minutes later. But there's a particular dream that I had, and it must have been about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was kind of in this kind of almost like a dungeon, like a cave underground. And, you know, I knew that my mission was to find a key to get me out of that place. And obviously there's time distortion, you know, inside your imagination. And it felt like I was there for years and years and years. And then right at the end, it kind of occurred to me that I had the key all the time and I could have left this place whenever I wanted. And that dream just played on my mind again and again and again. And it was kind of like, well, there's got to be something to that metaphor more than just a dream if it's weighing on my mind. And of course, you start thinking, well, what does the cave represent? You know, the certain restrictions or kind of barriers in your life. And what does the key represent? And I think for me, it represented my ability to be resourceful, to do the things that I needed to do. And I think a lot of people are way more resourceful than they give themselves credit for, you know, but there are certain limitations or blocks. So using that phrase locked or unlocked is a very healthy metaphor, because what you're saying is the resources are there. You just need to unlock them rather than kind of acquire something new. What's the
Mhm.
most powerful transformation that comes to mind of you unlocking something within someone else, someone that you've worked with?
Oh, there's a few. Um, Anxiety is a big one. That one of my clients, she had terrible fears of she had a terrible fear of vomiting and not being able to, and therefore not wanting. She wanted a few more children than she already had, but she did get morning sickness. And so she was afraid, she had a terrible fear that she would be vomiting and be unavailable to assist the children. And it was an irrational fear, but it was one brought up by something that happened in her youth growing up, where she had thrown up a lot, and it really prevented her from, being well enough to carry on with the things in her life that she needed to. So that was one of the greatest causes of her anxiety. But she had crippling anxiety other than that, a terrible fear of flying, and just, her breath was up here the whole time, and her shoulders constantly going up. You could just tell that she lived in a constant state of being right up here in her head, and all the what ifs, because as we know, what if is about things that we have no control over that we think might happen. And so I just worked with her in those sessions and on her energy, with a lot of toning, a lot of sounding. And then she's gone on, and she now has four beautiful children. Had, pretty good pregnancies. She was still a little bit sick in the pregnancies, but she got through the fears, her greatest fears. She has flown, and it's been like an absolute dream. And her husband has been one of her biggest believers in her continuing to have some sessions. She hasn't been for quite a while now, because she feels like she only needs a balancing session every so often. But I remember after her first or second session, when she walked in the door, she said, my husband wants to say thank you. He just is, he's just blown away by the difference in the person that I am. So that sort of, that on a metaphysical level has transformed something in her that held the keys to her being able to relax into who she was, and to stop worrying about the things that might unfold. If, what if? There was another client that I had, and he had really bad vision. He had degeneration in one eye and retina separation. And, I picked up immediately as he walked in that there was issues in certain areas of his life with his father, and with, his viewpoint, and being gay, and just his vision of himself. And I began working with him, and his eye, just over the course of sessions, it would get well, and then it would regress a little bit. So it would get better and then regress a little bit. And then it's got to the point now where his eye, whereas before I would look at him, and he's only in his early 20s, he's only very young, and his eye would be like a cloud. It would be so clouded over, and he wouldn't be able to have great vision out of that eye. It would be very tender and sore and sensitive. And now I see him, and there's so much clarity in that eye. But our body gives us the signs of what exactly it is, because with his eye, it was his view. It was his view on his own life, and his view on the life and the relationship that his father had, which was one that he wanted to be close, but wasn't close. And so we talked a lot about his relationship with his father, which he went on to, to really listen to the messages received. And the relationship he has with his father now, he's at ease with him, and he talks openly with him, and he feels like it's next level relationship. And it was there all along. It's just that he had the key to unlock it for his father to enter into that space anyway, because his father didn't have the capacity to be able to unlock it. But his father certainly had the capacity to meet him halfway once he opened up that doorway. There's so many different scenarios, but they're often physical or emotional, mental.
Yeah. Was it your belief that eye condition was psychosomatic? So there wasn't anything medically wrong. It was just that, he had created the symptoms based on, the issue that he was dealing with.
Well, he was born with a condition, but then it was exacerbated in a very heated argument that he had with a close person at one stage, and that was when the retina separation happened. So it was something that he had been born with, but I always, I believe that whatever we experience physically is the result of the lesson that we need to learn. It's put in front of us. The place that we receive it in our body is the place that we have the most likelihood of being able to put together. And with our eyes, it's going to be vision, you know, and with our ankles, it's going to be stability and direction, and
Mm.
knees as well. So with all of the body parts, yes, sometimes we're born with it. Other times it comes on, um, through different circumstances through our life.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people are, there's a phrase that I didn't really see too much, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and it comes up a lot now, particularly with social media. And it's the phrase triggered. So a lot of people,
Mm.
they'll see a social media post or some kind of meme, and it will trigger them. It will immediately get them into a particular state, and quite often that's not a healthy state. That might be anger or righteousness or frustration, or one of these things. um, and obviously with social media there is the ability to have an element of safety. You're in your place, they're in their place, so it encourages perhaps a higher intensity of emotional expression than perhaps we would have seen if it was in a face-to-face conversation. What's your thoughts on the nature of people being emotionally triggered?
Mm. I think that the trigger that comes up is going to be the thing that sets a train of thought in motion, that if they're available to follow the intuition that follows the trigger, that's where they're going to find the answers. And a lot of people, so what I'm looking for a phrase where the way a lot of people treat their children today is to wrap them in cotton wool and protect them from harm and protect them from this and that and the other. And to me, that's the worst thing you could do, because we need to be exposed to the triggers in our life, because then we don't learn how to use our own intuition to navigate life ourselves, our own way. So if we get a trigger, it's going to bring up something that will cause an immediate reaction, and therefore, if you go beyond the reaction, you can go into the actual response, because, as you know, there's a big difference between a reaction and a response, and the reaction usually comes from a place of deep trauma that we're experiencing within, and it's a weapon that comes out. It's like, don't you do that, because that's not safe to go there, because there's a lot of pain that you just hit a nerve on with that thing that triggered me. So I'm going to react and get angry and get abusive and blame and put it all out there and just go into a rage, because that will, diffuse the situation enough for me to go back into my safe hidey hole where those emotions are stored, and don't you dare tap into them again. So when you start to respond and go deeper into the reaction, you can start to tap into, well, where is that pain all hidden and what needs to be released? That in itself is then going to bring you into looking at the scenario instead of something that you want to fix and get rid of or solve. It's going to be a doorway that opens into a number of different varieties of many, many, many other doors that you can go down. And each of those doors, I believe, are doors of intuition. And if you have an intuitive hit and you don't follow it and you close that door, then the next door is available to be opened. But it might be a month later, and you might be in a different place, but it might be the doorway to the same healing domain that you were trying to get into. So the problem with following intuition, which most of us have, is that we get that thought, that knowing that that's definitely what I need to do, but then our mind wants to take over. Our brain wants to work it out, and it wants to explain away what that means. And as soon as our mind becomes involved, then the intensity of the intuition dwindles. If that makes sense, our mind comes in and starts to play games with it and turns it around and says, well, okay, yeah, that's a good idea, but that sounds a bit dangerous. So what I think you should do instead of leaving your job is that you should try and make peace with who you're there with, and you should be grateful for everything that's in front of you, and you should, whereas if you quit your job there and then, there was probably a great possibility of something right on the tail end of you quitting the job becoming available to you, or something available that you could take you to a next level. And it might not be a job, it might be a travel opportunity, and it might be something else. So does that make sense? Do you see where?
No, it does make sense. And
Yeah.
I think in a strange way, you've got the kind of dichotomy between emotion and intellect. So sometimes there's an emotional reaction, which people generally interpret as being intuitive. And then there's the evaluation or analysis of that. And I think intuition can be positive or negative. I think a lot of fear comes from an intuitive place, but it isn't always helpful or useful. And sometimes the evaluation can help. But sometimes, it really gets in the way, and all that what if thinking, which is logical rather than emotional, actually can stop people from pursuing things that are really, really kind of powerful and valuable for them. I also think with the triggers, it's sometimes bizarre how it's relatively easy to have almost the opposite emotional reaction from the same trigger, just when you perceive it in a different way. Because I remember, in my teenage years, I would see people with the kind of things that I wanted, and that would cause jealousy or this kind of feeling of, a lack of fairness. And now I see the same things, and it really inspires me, and it's exactly the same things that I'm seeing, but I kind of perceive it in a different way. How, and I would also say that sometimes comes from, anger as well. Sometimes anger can very quickly turn to empathy, just from, saying, well, what's their point of view? Why, where are they coming from to kind of have that opinion? What's your thoughts on how easy it is, or the process of changing these triggers to actually evolve, or kind of, um, level up might be a way of thinking about it, but kind of mature, I guess, in some ways, to have these triggers become more useful than, with a victim of all these things that are kind of out there in the world.
Okay, I think learning where the biggest shadows that we carry are, because we all have different reactions to different shadows, and the ones that through a bit of study with a few mentors that uh, I've narrowed them down to is, there's a lot of victim consciousness, and there's a lot of times that not even a victim consciousness, but we perceive ourselves to be a victim in the role, or we perceive other people to be victims. And there's a prostitute where we sell ourselves short, and so we're willing to exchange ourselves, for acceptance in return for time or money, or an input on our behalf. We're willing to be accepted regardless of the cost of us. And there's also the child in us that comes out, and the saboteur also. And so when we're coming from a place from those lower vibrational archetypes, we're going to be easily triggered, because the language of them is very strong, and it keeps us safe inside our little boxes where we feel we need to be to survive in the world. Whereas the other side of those, we've got the magician and the lover and the warrior and the sovereign, who are all very powerful archetypes. They have a completely different language. And, it's like, well, no one else has power over me, and nothing else has power over me. And I decide what I value, and I decide what my value is. And I decide, if I'm going to approach this from a place where I use my own resources rather than play victim or child, like I need somebody else to help me through my life. So when you start responding through the language of those higher level archetypes, sorry, my battery just, oh, there we go. When you start responding through the higher level archetypes rather than the lower ones, you're going to get those answers that you just spoke of then. You're going to get the different energy. It's a completely different energy, isn't it?
Mm.
It's confidence, and it's knowing, and it's value, and it's worth. Whereas the other ones are all about low worth and low value and low confidence and fear.
Yeah, being on the
Mm.
receiving end rather than the instigator.
It was,
Obviously, one of those archetypes you mentioned is the magician, which is a very powerful archetype, and it's fundamentally about creating change, that transformation, which also aligns with this metaphor that you use, being an energy and sound alchemist, which is also about, transformation and change. In what way do you use the metaphor of alchemy to make you feel more resourceful and help create change in other people?
because I think alchemy is just an amazing word. It conjures up, it's like a magical word. So it means that you can create something out of nothing. You can turn something around completely, and the alchemist would, spin something out of, something completely different, make it a completely different frequency in the way that it appears on the earth. And I think that we're all capable of that. I think we've all got the things that we were born with, or the things that we chose to come here to live with, and then to overcome and to use as our challenges or our purpose in this life to move forward, and then to see where we can take them, not only to live through it, but to see where we can expand our life to, where the possibilities are. I just love the idea of having known that my life has been one big alchemy in these last, several years especially. And even looking back on the years prior to that, I was living, intuitively, not really knowing it a lot of the time. I just got stuck when one situation piled on top of the other, and I was in a very low energy place inside of myself, and I allowed all of those very old patterns to speak the loudest in me. And I guess it was a build-up of those that then took me to a place of do or die. I could have lived on a very low level frequency. I could have been medicated for the rest of my life, and I could have said, okay, well, I know other people need to tell me what to do. And a lot of people do live like that because they don't believe that they have the strength, or that they can come off the medication, or that there's another answer to be, and that they do have the inner strength. Those lower voices keep a hold of them. But when you do take that first step, I believe the next door will open and open and open, because there's just a series of key after key after key through every single door. If you look down, you'll find another key, but sometimes you might have to look, it might be behind a bush, it might be behind something else, it might be inside somebody else that you need to meet that holds the key. So it's one by one that we follow. And like I was saying before, I love the metaphor of the doors, and this is another way of using that alchemy, that if you go through one door and you don't take that next step, it's okay. There's plenty of other doors that will arise in the circumstances where you've chosen to go. There's no such thing as the wrong way. It's a detour. And I think sometimes we can detour for most of our lives, and other times we can take every opportunity for change, and often somewhere in between.
Mm. So tell us a bit about your book. What can people expect from the book? Where's it available
Mhm.
from? Give us that title again, and just a bit of an intro to it, really.
Okay, I've got it here. It's the title is Unlocked by Carmelle Crinnion. Discover Your Hidden Keys. I do talk a lot. The book evolved as soon as I began writing it. It really evolved quite quickly, and I wanted to share the spiritual transformational journey that I had from my own perspective, and how it led me into working with people and discovering the life purpose that I had through this gift that I didn't really know existed, because I was raised Catholic and I had no idea that any of this metaphysical world, consciously no idea that it really existed, because I was indoctrinated into this Catholic religion. So once I started writing, I realized that there's many incidents in my life that I had to write about, because they were the cause of, a lot of they were the triggers in my life. So, I've been married a few times, and I've been divorced, and there was an affair that I had, and there was, I was cheated on. And so I believe all of these things, one of my big things is close relationships and people pleasing that I grew up. And so looking back on the major relationships, I fell into this old habit of pleasing people and always wanting to do what was best for the other person, because I didn't want to be abandoned. I didn't want to be rejected. I wanted to just always keep that person. I wanted to be a good girl. So, and in doing that, every time I lost such a part of myself that, and came to this place of inner strength. So I grew, but I gave away. And then I came to the conclusion that, like, this can't work. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. So I would take the step, but then I would create another situation that was almost the same, but on a different level. So it wasn't until I'd been through, a series of events of those relationships where I overgave to the point of just completely losing the love and the passion that I had for that person because of my own destruction to myself and to our relationship, is that has taken me to a place where I've had to deeply reassess, and it's been a deeply embedded program. And so I write about all those events in my life that have triggered me. And I had breast implants, and then 8 years later, and which was only just this year, I had them removed because I found that they were draining my energy terribly. And there were other medical implants that I had in that I had to have removed as well. They were contraception devices. And, these were giving me signs that I didn't realize. So I write about the difference before and after, and what they did to my body, how they drained my body of the energy. And that was all associated with these ingrained patterns. So everything's a clue. Everything's a clue. And that's probably the underlying message in my book. Everything's a clue, but we have the keys within to be able to get into unlocking it.
Mm. I think it's a fantastic concept. It's a powerful metaphor, very empowering as well. And where can people find the book, wherever they are in the
It's
world?
available right now on Amazon, and it is going to be available in bookstores because it's only just being printed. It's not in bookstores as yet. It's on Kindle, it's on iBooks, it's on most platforms that you will buy a book, but Amazon and Kindle are and iBooks are the ones that is freely available on right now.
Fantastic. It's been a pleasure to interview you, Carmelle. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
My pleasure, Adam. Thank you for having me.
And to you at home, thanks for joining me on Modern Mindset. See you again soon for more.